All right, it's Monday. We had no game last weekend for Illinois football, but that doesn't mean we're not going to talk with J Leman. This one's going to be a fun one, Jay. We're basically letting our listeners, the fans out there, take over the questioning part of this. So this is easy for me. So we're going to put you to work, though, with all these mailbag
I
questions.
like it. And the fans are what make this stuff possible, right? And that's what makes everything so much fun. And you play and you do stuff like this for the fans. So let's get their questions answered.
Well, before that, I want to ask you, 3-5, Illinois. This has been a very disappointing season to this point so far. But what is the one thing I guess you're most concerned about after these 8 games?
Well, I'll give you my most concern. The thing I'm most positive about. The thing I'm most concerned is that I thought going into the year that we were going to be a very, very stout up front and both offensively and defensively. At times defensively, we've looked like that when Newton and Randolph have been healthy. That hasn't been a lot lately. Johnny has exceeded expectations, and Keith's played well when he's been healthy and in there. He's been banged up the last couple of weeks. I think the offensive line's been the biggest disappointment. And also, I will also say the receiver room, other than Isaiah Williams. I feel like we thought we had some more guys in that room that were going to kind of take the next step. When you look at experience across the board on this football team, we knew the DBs and linebackers were really low in experience. We also knew that the running backs, although you had some semi-veteran guys, not a ton of carries back there. McCray didn't play last year much. Reggie Love didn't play much except for the last game of the season. And Chase Brown was really the workhorse. I wasn't expecting a ton out of those, but I was expecting some on the lines and the receivers. So it would be said, if those are your 2 most experienced positions and you're only 3-5, those positions haven't played as well as you thought they would. So that's probably my biggest disappointment.
Yeah, and I was going to follow up, Jay. What encourages you most, especially with these last 2 games, right?
Yeah, I think it's Luke Altmaier. I actually think he's the best quarterback in the West. I mean, that's a strong statement to make, but who are you going to trade him with? I think Hudson Card, though, started with a bang and probably a more highly touted transfer portal target, both for the Illini and other people. Luke Altmaier has showed his moxie and his ability to make plays down the stretch. He's got 2 game-winning drives, okay? Without those 2 game-winning drives, we have 1 win. Quarterbacks are judged ultimately by wins and losses, how they play in the fourth quarter, how they take care of the football. Let's take out the Penn State game. Yeah, I had 4 picks. He played bad against Penn State. It was a bad game. This is still a guy who's in single digits as far as games started in a career, okay? So we knew there'd be some learning curves. We can say that in the spring. It's just hard to go through it when you say, oh, this and oh, that, if we didn't do that, if we didn't do that. I think Luke Altmaier gives us a real chance to build around a guy and to build a system around a guy for a long time. What he's done with his feet has been remarkable. That's probably the most pleasant surprise. And, you know, I think, like I said, I think he's the best quarterback in the West. I don't think there's a guy that's better. Maybe Tanner Mordecai was up there. Mordecai's been hurt the last 2 weeks. I certainly don't think whatever quarterback's gone out for Iowa, Nebraska, or Northwestern has been good. Cadillac Manis has been average at best. And so you look at the West, and I think we're sitting pretty with a quarterback that has 2 more years of eligibility.
Wholeheartedly agree with everything you just said right there. All right, Jay, this 4-game stretch, there's some opportunities. Like if Illinois fans want to be optimistic, they can see a path to a bowl game here still. But I think it starts at Minnesota without Johnny Newton for the first half. Minnesota at 3-2 in the Big Ten right now. What is the key to pulling off that win that I think might be necessary to get to that Big Ten or get to that bowl game?
Yeah. So just a quick note here. You know, I'm a Dick Van Dyke guy, and I have my washing machine being worked on. So if you hear some rattling in the background, it's my washing machine that's being fixed up. So anyway, sorry for the noise, guys. There's always lots of stuff going on Monday. But I think the key right here is when you look at what Minnesota did in their previous game, where they it wasn't Iowa. Who they just beat this week? They beat not Nebraska. They beat who did Minnesota beat?
Didn't they just beat Iowa? Yeah, it was Iowa, right?
No, they beat Iowa the week before.
Oh, okay.
They ran for Michigan State. I'm sorry. So I watched the game myself, but you watch enough games and you talk to enough people. So I'm sorry. So
that's my fault. I took the week off of watching football.
Okay, I'm watching Michigan State and Minnesota. I think it was the afternoon game, and you know they had Jordan Newman, Tyler Newman's brother, another Illinois transplant right out of St. Charles, who we didn't get obviously to come here. But he was a walk-on. He ran for 204 yards against Michigan State. Michigan State's not a great defense, and certainly they are trending down. They are on the longest ever losing streak for the Michigan State football Spartan team, which is pretty astounding. You think about the history of that program. But what they did is he had 40 carries for 204 yards. He was the fourth string back, right? And that we could have Darius Taylor back and whatnot, but it always comes down to stopping the run, because that is how they do the time of possession. They're oftentimes in their games that they win, they have 40 minutes of time of possession to 20 minutes for the other team. If you look at what they did last year against Illinois, that script was really flipped. And the script, honestly, was that Illinois had the ball for 40 minutes roughly and had a couple turnovers and whatnot, and really dominated every facet of that game. Cadillac Manis actually got in that game, I think, because Tanner Morgan took a hit during that game. But I think it always comes down to stopping the run. I don't think the Joe Rossi defense has been as good or as stout as last year. So they've been giving up more plays. They certainly have looked better against Iowa and Michigan State. Now, who doesn't look better against Iowa and Michigan State? But the key is going to be turnovers. They've really done well when they've gotten turnovers and run the football. If we can win those matchups, we'll do well.
Yeah. Feels like a game like if you get off to an early lead and force them to throw a little bit more, Jay, you got a better chance. I mean, that sounds easy every game, but they do have the quarterback advantage. I would agree with you.
Yeah, I think Cadillac Manis played probably his best game last week. He threw for 200. They ran for 200 and they threw for 200. Most of that was in the first half. Michigan State really selling out to kind of stop the run, and then they just got wore out later on at Michigan State did. So Cadillac Manis, they have some weapons. So Daniel Jackson is back-to-back 100-yard games. Brevin Spanford at the tight end position, obviously a really solid tight end, preseason All-American, has not produced the way they thought he would this year. Of course, Chris Altman-Bell on year 8. So you know how it goes. Hey, are you hearing a bunch of noise in the background?
No, you're good. You're good.
Guys.
No.
It's like brrr.
I hear it a little bit.
Okay, sorry,
it's
guys.
faint from our end.
Well, as long as you guys can hear it, it's the real life. This is live, guys. We don't church it up at all. It's like, come on, let's go.
All right, Jay, let's get into these questions from the listeners, and they sent some good ones. We'll start off with a little bit of Illinois football focus this season, and then we'll dive into some good ones about your time at Illinois and all of that.
Sure.
But here's Illini Colon says, probably been asked before, but what does Jay think of Bielema needs to right the ship here?
Well, first and foremost, let's thanks for the question, Illini Colin, I think.
Yeah.
I would say this: we got 4 more games. The biggest thing to right the ship is to win the last 4 games. If you do that, I don't think anybody has any complaints about you. All those games are certainly winnable. I think Iowa's the toughest to win, but Iowa's offense has been horrific, guys. Has been horrific. But some games are getting more difficult. I think Northwestern's getting more difficult. I think they're improving. Again, we tend to get teams on the back end when they're all ready to go, and sometimes we kind of get worse as the season goes on. But that was the case last year. We had, I don't say we got worse, but we had some games we didn't necessarily follow through. The previous year we got better. But I would say these 4 games are the most important thing. Rather than let's get this recruit, let's do that. Let's win the 4 games in front of us, or win 3 games and get to a bowl game. Everything else will become easier when you win. If you win, recruiting, keeping coaches, all that stuff becomes way easier.
What do you think is the difference for recruiting if it's a 4-win season or a 6-win season?
I think that's a good question. Here's the deal. I think you want to be able to sell sustained success. Listen, other than the first year where we missed a bowl game by 1 game, we won a bowl game every year. Okay. Now we're not where we need to be, but that's why I'm talking to you, because you're the guy that's going to help us get there. Right. And you pitch it like that. That's how you do it. What I don't want to see is, hey, we go 4 wins. It's like we had 8 wins last year. We had 4 wins. I don't want to go on a train that's going the wrong direction. And so I think it does make a difference. I think it makes a difference too when you're competing against a lot of schools that you're getting beat by. So you got beat by Nebraska. We compete with Nebraska for recruits. Purdue, right? Northwestern, Iowa, Wisconsin, all those teams we recruit against. And so it's not only that, but it's the head-to-head matchups, Indiana sometimes, head-to-head matchups, and also where are we at in the conference.
All right, Tim asks, does Barry Lunny's system work with the type of offensive line, especially tackles, road graders, that Brett Bielema and Bart Miller recruit? Secondly, does it seem like Brett Bielema is forcing his style on Barry Lunny versus what Lunny wants to do?
Okay, great question. I'll start with the second question because that's kind of more kind of a macro picture, and the first one's kind of a micro picture. So every head coach forces their system on the offensive coordinator to some degree. I truly believe that. I'll give you Iowa, for example. Iowa had Ken O'Keefe for years, probably the first 13 or 14 years under Kirk Ferentz, and the offense looked largely like it does right now under Brian Ferentz. They did have a 4 or 5 year segment there where they brought in Greg Davis from Texas, highly touted offensive coordinator. Mac Brown's offensive coordinator for the 2005 national championship team with Vince Young, had some explosive offense is with Colt McCoy. Those were largely pass happy, zone read, throw it all over the yard. When Greg Davis came to Iowa, there was none of that. It was zone left, zone right, boot left, boot right, right? So was he influenced by Ferentz? Absolutely, 100%. Was Brett Bielema influenced by, Barry Alvarez and took a lot of that stuff from him? Yes, I would say 100%. So obviously Brett was a defensive coordinator under that. So yes, I do believe there's always an influence because the head coach, remember this, is the chief game manager, right? And so if you're the chief game manager, you can't go and throw it all over the yard and have 14-second drives and kick it away when you want to be a ball control, time of possession, complementary football team. You just can't do that. So there is always, not just with Brett, in the vast majority of times at the collegiate level especially, there is going to be a head coach style that is a flavor of the offensive coordinator, okay? So number one. Number two, do these tackles work? Here's the deal. We've said this. Isaiah Adams is not the ideal tackle. I think he's an ideal guard. I think he's done admirably, especially the last 3 or 4 games, in learning how to play tackle. And honestly, I think it makes him more versatile at the next level to get a roster spot because he could go to multiple positions along the line. I actually think Julian Pearl, I don't necessarily see him as a road grader. I see him more as athletic and long. I don't see him as a road grader. I think he is a tackle that works in the system. I think in general, you want tackles that are long and athletic. In most positions, you want that, right? Long, athletic, that can move their feet. I'm not sure. I think for Barry Lunny's system, that's going to throw the ball more than a traditional maybe Wisconsin run happy. Yes, we need a little bit more athletic tackles. I think Julian Pearl fits that bill, though. I think he is athletic. I think Isaiah Adams is there by default because of the lack of depth. And I think Brandon Henderson, the guy that knows, I think he's probably the future at tackle and what they're looking to do. So right now, what you're seeing, and this is kind of, maybe we'll answer some other questions too, is not a complete picture of what you want it to look. Obviously, we're 3-5, but as far as the guys in certain positions that we want to be there.
Great answer. Harold asks, I think we need to use our speedy freshman receivers, LZ, Wilcher, more. This would add a whole nother dimension to our offense. It would make us play less conservative. What do you think?
Okay, that's a good question. LZ obviously has the look of it. Wilcher was highly touted in the spring and in fall camp. The reality is you're only going to have 2, maybe 3 receivers in the game at one time. So if you're going to put LZ and Wilcher in, the question is, who do you take out? Who are you okay taking out? Are you okay taking Isaiah Williams? Well, no, not Isaiah Williams. He's the most productive guy. Okay, so you okay taking out Casey Washington, who's maybe our most experienced and probably the best hands? Well, okay, we'll do Casey Washington. We'll put LZ in for that. Okay, well, LZ doesn't have as good a hands, at least in the game, as Casey Washington. Are you willing to take a drop or 2? Okay, Wilcher. If we took Wilcher out for Pat Bryant, because we don't want to put Wilcher in for Isaiah Williams, even though Wilcher is more of a slot receiver like Isaiah Williams, then take Pat Bryant. Now I've got I got no size on the football field, right? So I got no big receiver on the outside with Pat Bryant. So I get that we want to get reps in there, but when we want to be a 1, 2, maybe 3 tight end team as well, and we got to have a running back on the field, guys, there's only 5 skill players that we can get out there. So there's 6 if you include a quarterback, but 5 linemen and 5 skill players and a quarterback. So who are they going to take a spot? If you're a freshman and you want to take someone's spot, you've got to be better than them at every facet of the game, okay? Or exceptional at one facet. We saw that with Deuce Span with speed and whatnot to get in a couple reps. But if you're even with it with the veteran, you're not actually going to play usually. They're going to give the veteran the benefit of the doubt unless they're just doing a wholesale youth movement and say, hey, let's get the young guys on the field.
Yeah, I was going to say, I get it. I'd like to see a little bit more of Malik Elzy, the shiny new toy, or Kanari Wilcher. Like, they need that speed. Like, they could use that speed, but what about blocking? What about running the right routes?
Right.
That leads to interceptions because Luke Altmaier throws it where it's like, those are the things, like, as fans or from outsiders, like, the coaches play who they trust and who they think is going to help them win, right? Like, Jay, like, so that's the hard part of this.
Well, it all rolls downhill. Like, you run a wrong route and throws a pick. Now everybody's mad at Barry Lunny. We should be mad at you. But they got to take ownership. So it's can I trust you to do the right thing? And it's just super hard to build trust in critical situations because they're going to put the guys they trust in on critical situations. So when you get a chance to make a play, and you've got to come down with it. Now, I will say, I don't know what he does. I've been impressed by what I've seen from Ashton Hollis. He's a one guy who doesn't get mentioned a ton, but when he's in there, I've seen him make plays and be Johnny on the spot.
Yeah. All right, Tech asks, what is your ideal O-line for this team and why?
Well, I don't know if there's an ideal with this team, Tech. I think they've gotten better. So anyway, I think Josh Cruz is going to be a good center. So I don't know if you're saying ideal with who we have now or, build it out in the future, but I'll do both. So
great.
I think Josh Cruz is going to be a good center. He's obviously your best player, right? I think Zy Chrysler, if he can practice and stay healthy, has shown last year. And if you look at the last 2 games this year, he can play. Like, he's a good player.
And the other thing, Jay, is when he's not playing and someone else is playing in front, you say, oh, Zy Chrysler isn't that bad. Especially a guard, right?
These guys are out here for a reason, right? So I hate to be the ideal line is that my starters are the people they put out there, but it is what it is, right? I think in an ideal world, I would love to find a right tackle that could, play for Isaiah Adams. Again, not because I think Isaiah is a bad right tackle. I just think he's more natural guard. And I'd love to have us be able to get – when I went into the season, I thought, hey, behind Julian Pearl, behind Isaiah Adams, we got a yard on short yardage. That's what we can count on. We haven't been able to count on that largely because they've been moved around a lot. We haven't had a great push on that. And I think Julian Pearl would be there. I think you got Geske and Whitenack, and there's one other guy that's gotten some reps, Jordan Slaughter. That's kind of who's been in there. There might have been one other guy in there, maybe Barliv has gotten a few here and there. But I guess that's the ideal O-line. If I talk about what is my ideal O-line for, this team moving forward, ideally it looks like this. Most great O-lines have some, undersized, maybe not undersized. Your always undersized guys will be your center usually, but a center that can reach block, that has the speed to reach a nose line. So if the nose is lined up on the, left of the center, can he use his left leg to get his head around on the other side of that tackle on the zone play? So can your center reach block, and can he be stout on the pocket? Remember, on the fan shape of the pocket, he has to be the most stout. Okay.
Yeah. Which Doug Kramer was great at both those things.
At both those, right? The reach and, so you got to be able to reach block and you got to be able to be stout. And it goes without saying, sometimes we forget about this. We haven't had a ton of bad snaps. Okay. I can't stand what Wisconsin center snaps. They just look bad. They look slow. They look like they're not snap back fast. They're often low. Oftentimes it messes up the timing. They got to get that fixed out, Wisconsin. But I share that as a reference point. Like, we haven't had a lot of snap problems, and I think you forget about it. It's like referees. You forget about them when you feel like they're doing a good job. They're the main thing when you feel they're not doing a good job, right? So something about at the guard position, you're usually going to want road graders, right? You're usually going to want bigger guys, stronger guys. Maybe they lack space and ability to move, maybe as well as maybe a tackle, but they still need to be able to pull, right? Because you're going to have them pulling around the guard and whatnot. And tackles, they probably need to be the most athletic. They've got to block edge rushers, and they've got to have an ability to be stout, but also be able to move as far as pull and get their feet in proper alignment and be able to get depth and stay low. I mean, hey, get that kick, slide back and stay low. That's kind of the ideal. You'd want to tackle that's in the reason you want to tackle taller is because you're able to get more weight on him, right? If he's 6'5", 6'6", you can get him to 320, 330. If he's only 6'2", it's going to be hard to get him above 300 without looking fat and maybe decreasing his mobility.
Right. Yeah. So like next year, I think Brandon Henderson, Josh Geske at the left side, Henderson maybe at left tackle. That's a big jump for him. So we'll see if he can do it. Josh Kreutz at center, and I would imagine Chrysler, Whitenack, and a transfer. Jay, like that on the right side, kind of your road graders over there.
Yeah, JUCO or transfer portal for sure.
Yeah. All right, Jay. State asks, we saw really good retention last season, very few transfers. Obviously, still a lot in front of them for the season, but how does the staff address retention after a more an up and down season? I'll say Brett Bielema with NIL, that has been his focus is retention. I thought it was the right play. I'd rather have Johnny Newton than some random transfer coming in and playing that spot.
Right. It's just, I was talking about this with guys in the guys at the Big Ten Network. It's sad because everybody kind of has their team that they kind of cheer for separately at Big Ten Network. And we were talking the days of saying, hey man, in 3 years, we're going to be good are done because you never know who's going to be here. So I do think, hey, retaining you put so much work to getting people here. If they're guys you want in your program, you need to work to keep them here. Or if you feel like, hey, they might not be there now, but man, in 1 or 2 years, this guy's going to be a good player. So you need to work to keep him here. I think that's good. So when it comes to retention on the downside, people are always more upset on the downside. But I will say it often gives players an opportunity to play more. If you're winning all the time, you don't get to play much. But if, hey, you're losing, hey, there's a chance for you to get some reps. And I think for the most part, we've seen the highly touted guys in this class, them make an effort to get them on the field at some way. They've earned it. And if you're highly touted, if you weren't highly touted, chances are you're not going to have a ton of transfer portal interest, right? You were a 3-star guy, you showed up, you redshirted. It's kind of like, you're not going to have a ton of people. Maybe some coach transferred somewhere else and would get you, but I don't see that being a huge problem.
Yeah, I mean, Fagan's played a huge role. Elzy has gotten his opportunities. Kareem, Zach Toby, like those guys, I'm really high on of what they could do and how they can develop.
Yeah, so they've got their chances. It's not like they're not playing. I mean, for those guys, it's like, well, am I going to have in a better position by going somewhere else? Probably not if I played as a freshman some solid minutes.
Bond asks, should star players, depending on position, stay in school longer, risking injury, wear and tear, miles, et cetera, to earn more NIL money? I think this goes, Jay, to a couple players on this roster who have extra years of eligibility. Isaiah Williams, is he going to be drafted? I got my doubts, right? Keith Randolph has had injury issues this year. Seth Coleman maybe hasn't put together the year. So for these guys with extra years of eligibility, the NIL dollars, how do you think it plays in the role here?
So a good question. So let's take it just an extreme example. I've seen some stuff that people say Caleb Williams shouldn't play the rest of the year. I mean, because they've lost 2 games and whatnot. So it's like he's just going to make so much money, which I'm not necessarily guaranteed. I think the hype on him is just unbelievable. I mean, one scout said that they had him ranked as the 11th, or not a scout. One media person had him as the 11th best ranked quarterback in the NFL. As a senior, I'm just like, these people are just, they say stuff, it just makes me go crazy. I'm just like, really? Like, guys are taking a step as if like you're not going to have the same problems of every other rookie quarterback. But hey, great question. I totally understand. I think it's always unique. I don't think you can really understand someone until in life in general, just in life, but also in football, if you don't understand their story, right? You got to know where people come from, and we all come from different spots, right? And so some of those guys sitting out of the bowl game last year, I don't blame them at all. From if you know their story, right? Are you blaming Witherspoon at all for sitting out of the bowl game when he probably was banged up with the hamstring? Number one, we think that got probably banged up in that Northwestern game, and now he's one of the best rookie corners in the league, maybe one of the better corners in the league already. It's a very small little piece, right? On that,
yeah, and you're telling the Brown brothers, like, hey, risk it all for this bowl game. That, listen, yes, it kind of matters for Illinois, but it really doesn't.
I mean, and guys that overcome so much, right?
Yes.
In the Brown brothers. So you have to look at it from that perspective. So it's a very bond. I wish that I could give you like, some very, specific answer, but I think it's always unique. And so like for a guy like Keith Randolph, I believe this is Keith's 5th year in school and he has the COVID year. And the same with Isaiah, I believe as well.
And Seth, yeah.
And Seth, like if I'm Seth or anybody on the defense other than Johnny Newton, and I could play another year, I probably would. Johnny has been exceptional. Johnny should go, and that's done. But like Keith is a guy who's, I mean, he was productive from he plays extremely hard. Okay, so he plays extremely hard. That's why he was one of the leading tacklers as a defensive tackle. But he's been banged up. And, when you're banged up, whether you like it or not, you do lose draft status. It is what it is. I mean, they're making an investment in the health of you. So, and for Seth Coleman, I think, hey, maybe stay. Isaiah Williams, here's the thing. I go back and forth on Isaiah because Isaiah's having a productive year. He does fit a very, very good niche role in the NFL, the slot receiver and punt returner, 2 roles that are needed. He's shown ability there. I feel like he's gotten better every year at receiver. Remember, I think this is his 3rd year playing receiver. So can he get better? I think he's the guy that's going to really have to evaluate, can I get better? Could I get into the mid rounds? Maybe I'm a late round undrafted guy. I don't know. I think he'll be great combine wise as far as agility stuff, probably not top end speed,
right?
But he's a guy I think you'd have to really think about. He means a lot to this team from a leadership perspective too, but he might be ready just to move on in general.
Correct.
Right. I mean, I think there's some guys who are like, I'm done. I know there were some players in the Big Ten last year, Penn State, Michigan, they really wanted to come back Penn State, Michigan wanted them to come back for a 6th year, might help them, but they were done. And that can be the case too.
Yeah, that's where I think Illinois is going to have these conversations. They are valuable. Those 3 guys are very valuable to Illinois next year.
This episode of the Illini Inquirer podcast is brought to you by BetterHelp. Give online therapy a try at betterhelp.com/Illini and get on your way to being your best self. Do you ever feel like your brain is getting in its own way? Like you know what you should do, what's good for you, but you just can't do it. Well, therapy helps you figure out what's holding you back so you can work for yourself instead of working against yourself. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. All you have to do is just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist. And if you and that therapist don't mesh, you can switch your therapist at any time for no additional charge. So make your brain your friend again and give BetterHelp a try. Visit betterhelp.com/Illini today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Illini.
Steven ask Jay if the Illini broke Maryland like they did with Wisconsin last year. What do you make of that?
Certainly looks like a different football team Maryland does over the past, ever since Ohio State second half. So I don't know if Ohio State broke them or we broke them, but defensively, this is a school that we talk about their offense. We know about their offense, but they're defensively, they had given up 21 points or less like 7 straight games until that Ohio State game. And then Illinois scored more than 21 and Northwestern scored more than 21. And defensively, they haven't been great. They haven't been great in 2-minute scenarios either 2-minute offense, 2-minute defense, the last 3 games. And when you don't play good in critical situations, think about Illinois and Wisconsin. They played great against Maryland in 2-minute situation, and Wisconsin, awful, right? They played awful most of the year in 2-minute situations. When you don't play good in those situations, you more often than not end up losing close games, and that's what happens, right? Because those games that are closer decide those 2-minute situations.
Benji asks, if you were AD, what would be your highest priority for renovations and changes to Memorial Stadium?
That's a good question, Benji. I have this dream that someday they will finish out the south side of the end zone, right? And they'll create a tunnel under Kirby or Florida, whatever you want to call that street. That's just south of the stadium. And not only do they finish that south end, but they make a whole athletes hall that connects State Farm Center to Memorial Stadium. and there's a corridor and stuff like that where all the athletes can eat. Everybody comes there, and during game day, it's a time where people can congregate, have fun, much like the Colonnades is as well. There's no way, just from an infrastructure standpoint, they can cut off Kirby as a street in Champaign-Urbana. It's a main thoroughfare between Champaign and Urbana, and there's no way they can do it. That's why I think you need to even expand the street, maybe make a tunnel, right? So it goes over that. So I would think, for me, when you talk about renovations and changes, I'm a football guy, so that's what I would shoot for. But I get, a lot of harassment because I don't get enough love to the basketball team who just beat Kansas and Bill Self in a number one exhibition. So against number one Kansas. So I want to give them some love too. I think those are your two marquee programs, and so I think that'd be an interesting thing to do. Do I think moving the students? I was playing when they actually moved the students from the east side over. Some people like that the end zone seats. Some people don't. Hey, if we can move a portion of them, but first we got to fill the stadium with the guys that we have now, rather than let's move the students.
Yeah, one thing I would love, and I don't know how realistic or feasible this is, I'd love to get fans closer to the field. I'd love to get them on top of the field, because you get it at Iowa, you get it at Nebraska. I remember talking to Josh Whitman first time I went to Nebraska, and he loved that. The fans were right on top of the field. So I don't know if they can lower the field. There's issues of 100-year-old stadium, right, Jay? But I just think that's a difference. I think this is a good stadium. I just wish the fans were more on top of it.
Yeah, I would agree. If you go to Michigan State, they have very similar walls and kind of a layout, but their walls are like 8 feet, 9 feet tall, meaning they lowered those walls. The field's been lowered. It looks like 6 or 7 feet. And that would open up those bottom rows to be able to and you could maybe put even more rows closer, right? And make the sidelines. Now, supposedly there's drainage issues and whatnot. I don't know if that's true or not. One thing I do love about the stadium, and you'll know this, like when you go to Michigan Stadium the big house doesn't look impressive from the outside. It's so dug into the ground, right?
Yep.
And I think Illinois has the great stadium boom of Dave Revson is like he wrote the book on college football. I mean, so he literally wrote a book. And so there's the great stadium booms of the 1920s where, right before the Great Depression, money was easy and they were building lots of stuff. And so they did a great job with Illinois getting that stadium. But I think from an exterior point of view, I remember Joe Paterno said it was his favorite stadium, right? I mean, it has a unique look. It's certainly Ohio State's. I put it on par as far as the look. It looks good, like Ohio State looks from the outside. Penn State's doesn't look good from the outside. Wisconsin's kind of
erector set. That's Minnesota's up there for me. I think Minnesota's looks great from the outside.
Yeah, they did. They did a good job, right? Memorial Stadium in Lincoln, they've done a good job fixing that up. Kinnick doesn't look that impressive from the outside, but they're doing a good job of getting fans, on top of you. Ross 8 doesn't look that impressive, but now they've fixed up the south end and they're doing a good job filling it up, even though they're 2-5. Every time I look on it, feels like they're filled up with it. So,
yeah, I would point people to Purdue, what they did in their south end zone. I think that'd be great at Illinois. Yeah. They got people on top of it as well. Let's see. If you could change, Jack asked, one thing about Illini football, we did the stadium, but uniforms, coaches, play style, what would you change? A lot of people ask me, Jay.
A record or lifetime winning record? Okay, go ahead.
A lot of people ask me about play style. When Illinois was mid-2010s, I just went to Dino Babers. Give Illinois an identity. Somebody like that just brings Illinois an identity. Purdue's had that for years. What you're getting out of Purdue. Illinois hasn't had that. They just haven't had that consistent identity. Obviously, with Bielema, you're looking for the Iowa, Kansas State, Wisconsin thing.
Yeah, so that's a great question, and I think the play of identity is play style. Like I got to watch Kansas, Oklahoma this week, and Jalen Daniels, the only game he's played is Illinois, by the way, just so you know. but this other guy, Bean, is actually pretty good, and again, you turn on a game in the Big 12, sometimes the SEC, it just seems like there's so much space out there. It's just like guys are running wide open and stuff like that and spread out. And I would make the argument that good football teams do it. I'd make the argument that in the 80s, Illinois was a pass-happy Mike White. We're throwing the ball all over the yard, and they had an identity behind that. I think when we were good, we got 4 plays on offense, but we're going to run them really good. And in 2007, we're going to do the zone read, the option pass. And, we're going to make you stop the run. And we're going to be, we're not going to be an offensive dynamo, but we're going to run the ball the spread and lead the Big Ten in rushing 2006, 2007. So I do think the identity is a big piece. They're still trying to kind of find that as they're trying to mix in some of Brett stuff and some of Barry stuff, as we talked about in other questions. Here's the deal on the play style stuff. Yeah, I think that could be one thing. The stadium, the uniform, the coaches, all that stuff. I think for us, if I could change one thing though, it'd be just and this is me talking to myself, is the overall apathy and skepticism of the here we go again in the fan base. And I think if we can change that, everything else will happen, right? But it's going to take a great leader, and maybe that's Brett. I hope it's Brett, to change that mindset. Because I think in those years that we've done good things, whether it's Ron Turner's year or Mike White or the 2007 season, we've changed that mindset to be like, we're good, we're getting players, we're competent, we're beating people. And whenever we have that, we saw that in 2022, we have an uprising that, oh my gosh, these dormant fans are alive. But until we get that mindset out of our head, and it starts with the product on the field, mindset and the players and the product on the field, not making the same mistakes and being consistent. You ever watched an Ohio State game? They have a mindset that they're going to find a way to win no matter what. I mean, that might be the toughest team to kill in the Big Ten. You think they're dead? They're never dead. They'll be down like 2 scores. You turn it on 8 minutes later, they're up a score with a minute left. You're like, what? Right? And that's part of it's talent, but part of it's a mindset. I would argue that Penn State doesn't have that mindset. I would say that Penn State is recruited pretty darn close to that level, but they don't have the mindset of Ohio State that we own this place and we're the best. So anyway, I think that's a big part of it. I think as fans, I'd love to change that.
You've heard us talk about home field apparel since the start of the season. There are a lot of collegiate apparel brands out there, but we wanted to partner with Home Field because their designs are the best out there. Some of Illini Inquirer's favorites are the basketball ringer tee, the rose tee, and the 1980s long sleeve with the script Illini. It's great. Be sure to check out homefieldapparel.com, filter by Illinois, and see what we're talking about. And our listeners get an exclusive deal using code Illini23. Using that code Illini23 gets you 15% off your first order. We all know you're wearing Illini gear, so if you're in need of a refresh, we really think that you should check out Home Field Apparel, which has the best designs, and these shirts, guys, are really comfortable. Their designs are super unique, and a lot of thought goes into each concept. There's really nothing else on the market like what Home Field is doing. You can find them at homefieldapparel.com and use code Illini23 for 15% off your first order at homefieldapparel.com.
Just a handful more here, Jay. This is really good stuff. Tent asks, as a former player, what is your take on the Michigan scandal, especially to those players who have recently played the Wolverines and those who will play them soon? Would a player be extra motivated?
Yeah, so I don't know if players would be necessarily extra motivated. I was never a guy that needed extra motivation. Like for me, I had 48 games guaranteed. That was it. It was heartbreaking to lose a game, as Johnny Newton saw, to get kicked out of a game or lose half a game. To me, I don't need motivation. You might say I might come out flat or whatnot. I've never tried to come out flat in my life. Maybe I made some mental errors and got in my head a little bit. For me, I've just always been a self-starter. I didn't have a choice not to be a self-starter. I couldn't go out there and be like that. So for me, the motivation is my take on the scandal is this. It seems to be a lot deeper than we originally maybe had thought, right? I do think that Matt Rule made a tremendous point. Not talking about the scandal in general, but if I go to my local high school team, I saw the defense come off, go underneath a tent, and had a flat screen TV plugged in which they watched the previous drive that they just did, literally filmed it in and said, okay, here's the mistakes you made, right? You go to the NFL, we got tablets all over the place. We got in-helmet communication. And Matt Rule said, we've got communication at any decent high school, we've got electronics. In NFL, it's all electronic. And yet in college, we can't even have pictures on the sideline of what plays look like. We don't have any iPads down there. We're not looking at screens or anything. We're trying to signal everything. So I do think the time has changed, that we do need to just instead of, like, as Matt Rule said, we have rock stars on pictures and random things to try to disguise things.
This feels like the impetus for that change, right?
It does. It does feel like it's. Excuse me. It does feel like it's leading to that. Here's the deal: a rule's a rule. I'm going to quote PJ Fleck as he, talked about last week. They asked him about the punt with Cooper DeJean. I don't know if you guys saw that play, the invalid fair catch, and he said there's nothing to there's really nothing to argue about. A rule's a rules, offsides, and holding's a holding. And obviously we know there's more, but PJ was kind of fighting for his team in that. And I will say this, as much as we might not like it, a rule's a rule that you can't go buy tickets for you or someone else to go film someone giving signals. Matt Rule and Brett Bielema had no problem admitting in interviews that we steal signals during games all the time. And everybody does it. It's well known that everybody's, and you can look over and do it. And there's no way to stop that. They had no problem. The thing is it's been a rule for a while that you can't go and film signals. You can't go scout during the season in person. And those are the rules. Okay. And if those are the rules and they were broken, you have to enforce them, because if you don't enforce them, what does that say about your rules?
What's the point of the rules?
So yeah.
We're a nation of laws, Jay. We got to follow them.
We got to follow the law. I mean, it is a rule. So I mean, like, is there going to be consequences? Well, yeah, there's going to be consequences if they find out that they did this. And it seems from the little streams of information that we get, which we certainly don't have any kind of official word, that it was a lot more sophisticated than maybe some initially thought.
Yeah. All right, Ron, speaking of rules, how do we change the targeting rule to make it closer to the NFL's? And do you have camp brand tool stories? We'll get to that in here in a little bit, but targeting rule, Jay, do you make any changes to it?
So I would make a change to the penalty. As far as I'm actually not upset about how the penalty is called at all. Although I feel like it's very defensive centric. Other than a blindside block for the offense, you'll rarely see a ball carrier actually get called for lowering his head, when sometimes he does lead with the crown of his head. So I would change it. So if a ball carrier led with the crown of his head and had contact, anywhere, maybe not to the head or neck of somebody, but led with his head down and hit somebody for his safety, maybe that would be it. So that'd be a change. The penalty itself, as far as what the actual penalty is it 15 yards? Is it 20 yards? Is it whatever it may be? I would change that to maybe a 25-yard penalty and not sitting somebody out, a 30-yard penalty, not sitting somebody, or maybe let the guy sit. The guy has to sit out for 5 plays or 10 plays or something. Don't make him sit out for like Johnny Newton. I think that's the mistake.
Nick, what hurts the Big Ten West teams moving forward? The newcomers coming into the conference or the elimination of divisions?
That's a good question. So remember, the 83 team played everybody that was tough, right? I mean, they're the only team in the history of the Big Ten to win all games to run the table in the Big Ten, okay, in one season. We played Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, right? So
I think the newcomers coming into the conference are going to have a bigger change than the guys that are actually here now, Jay. Like, I think Oregon is well equipped with how they play. Yeah. Those other schools are going to have a big, like USC.
So here's the thing.
It's going to be a big change.
This was really the first weather weekend I thought it affected stuff. We saw 2 or 3 fumbles. Well, I was watching Purdue, Nebraska. They couldn't hold the ball. They couldn't hold on to the ball or throw the ball for the first quarter. Well, Nebraska can't throw the ball anyway, but they were fumbling a bunch. We had a bunch of fumbles in the Michigan State-Minnesota game. It was wet. It was dreary. Think about the Rutgers-Michigan State game 2 weeks ago. It was pouring rain. Listen, it looks all great throwing the football and everything, but you've got to be able to run the football when it comes down to it. I don't know if Washington, USC, UCLA, like you said, are equipped to do that. But I will say this. Or on the flip side, Oregon and Washington look like far superior teams than anything in the West. Yeah. Anything in the West. So that, and there will be no West next year, but that they're being added into, yes. Do I think it affects the West some? The current West Division teams, yes, but I think it's a change of pace of play too for those other teams as well coming into the division.
Any Camp Rand Tool stories?
Camp Rand Tool. Well, the fan marker in, which is now, I believe the Quarters Inn and Suites, just a legendary place, right? First off, the the food was always interesting out there. I don't know who would make it or whatnot, but it was always interesting. The smell in the makeshift locker room, they moved the whole weight room out there from Champaign. The smell in that locker room was pretty brutal. All the ice tubs had to be made fresh after every practice. We're talking 20 ice tubs. We're just talking ice after ice after ice after ice. Some stories. So it was always a highlight about get past the 2-week mark in camp. And Zook had this thing where he would do backwards practice, where you get in this mode of like always doing individual first and then special teams. Well, he would just say, we're going backwards. We're just going straight to full out team, full contact, just crazy stuff. And we would all go crazy because it's like, it was the most fun. So it wouldn't be uncommon that we'd be going through warm-ups and he would blow the whistle and say backwards practice, So he blew the whistle one time, said, everybody come here. Like he was mad or something. He's like, all right, you got 5 minutes to go with your swimsuit on. We're going to the water park. Go. And we just go, ah! So think about it. You got a 2.5-hour practice at 90 degrees. You're like day 17. Little stuff like that. It's like, man, just throw me a bone.
Just break up the monotony there.
Yeah. So anyway, it broke it up, and that was exciting. What else could I tell you about Camp Rantoul? I remember staying with Matt Sinclair my first year. That was always interesting. Who he got roomed up with, that was always fun. I think what I remember too is, for me personally, I didn't know that when you're first a player, you tell people about injuries that you have, and so I just hid this blister that I got. Oh, it's just a blister. And this thing got so raw my freshman year that I couldn't put any kind of shoe on for like a week in the back of my heel. And they ended up, I played against Florida A&M my redshirt freshman year with half a shoe on that they taped on because they cut the back half off just so my heel could heal, basically. And I learned that you actually tell the trainers, hey, I'm actually banged up. But for me, I was so nervous about losing my spot that I just played through it. There's all kinds of things that I could share. None of it really bad, but I don't even know. With 2023 standards, you never know how much you can share.
That's right. Another trip down memory lane as we wrap up here, Jay. What was your favorite memory from the Rose Bowl season? Any behind-the-scenes stories from some of those big wins, Lucas?
Yeah, so I remember we played Wisconsin. They had a guy, I think his name was Chris Presley. He was their fullback. He was one of these 275-pound fullbacks, like playing lineman. And they had they had hyped it up to us all week. This guy's going to big boy in. Zook would always say, play Wisconsin, bring your big boy pads, blah, blah, blah. And they ran a lead play the first play of the game. And I will tell you, Antonio Steele, all 210 pounds of them, just decided, we knew it was a lead play. And he just like, if it's a lead play, I'm just gonna go as hard as I can and just blow the guy up. And all 210 pounds did blow him up. And I think that kind of blew up the 275-pound Chris Presley. I think that set the standard for the rest of that game. I do remember I actually, another injury during that game. In the first quarter, I hit my hand, and it hurt so bad. If you asked me to hold this cup like this, I couldn't hold it, right? But if you're wearing gloves, they can't tell you're taped up. So they taped it up, gave me some medicine and stuff, taped it up, and basically just kept my hand like that. My hand was just like that, but it's underneath the glove all the time. So if you saw me running, I was like, And so that was a little behind the scenes. I do remember also the hit on Luke Swan in that game. Justin Harrison, if you go by and watch that game, Luke Swan, they called him the Fenimore Flash, one of Brett Bielema's favorite all-time players, number one for Wisconsin. They've always got one little receiver that kind of runs around and goes deep. And I was privileged to play with Kevin Mitchell and Justin Harrison, guys who I don't think would be able to play a full season this year because of the targeting rules. But they hit Luke Swan going across the middle, actually ended Luke's career. He tore his hamstring because of the way that he fell and whatnot. But when I went to go look at Luke Swan that time, he was you could just tell in his face he was in a ton of pain, and I felt bad for him. But it was a memory of how physical our safeties were. Now, for the Ohio State game, that didn't start great. Okay, let's just remember that game started disastrous. Everybody got the call except one cornerback on our play. He'll go unnamed here. You guys can maybe fill in the blank on who the corner was that got the call. We're all running a certain coverage in which it's zone to one side and man on the backside. He was man against current offensive coordinator Brian Hartline, actually, for the Ohio State Buckeyes. He was man. He did not get the call. So he doesn't get the call. It's like probably a 70-yard play, and then they score one play later, and then I come off the field, and Zook's just furious at me. Just furious at me. I mean, just like, how in the world did we not get the call? Because as a middle linebacker, it was my responsibility to let everybody else know the call. And, although 10 guys got it, the 11th guy didn't get it. And so it was on me and so it's not a great way to start a game against number one. But again, you can't let the mental capacity of, as a freshman, I would have wilted under that and said, oh man, I can't believe I made a mistake. At that point I was like, it is what it is. Mm-hmm. So we obviously went on to play. They scored 14 points, I think, in the first 6 minutes. And then we came back. Obviously, Daniel Dufresne had that big run. Rest in peace, Daniel Dufresne. Gone too soon, but probably should have been reviewed for a fumble. Could have been a touchback on that play. And then I remember us just being so – I was so locked in on the tendencies of a Jim Tressel team. Not only from last year, but look, I still remember this day, hey, one back in the backfield, running situation, going to be in 12 personnel. It's only one of two plays. It's a one-back power the guard's going to pull, or it's going to be a draw. So the moment I see one back, I'm going to check that left side guard and see, does he look light in his stance? He did look in his stance. Got 2 tackles for a loss because of that. In the red zone, we knew they liked to do the jailbreak screen to Brian Hartline. DeRay Hicks tells me, hey, alert jailbreak. I think they're on the 18. If you go back and look at the clips, we know it's a jailbreak just by the line and make a tackle for a loss on Brian Hartline. So just the preparation. And then, kind of in no man's. I was in no man's land on that pick with Todd Beckman, who was the quarterback. We're lucky to get a hand on that. Antonio Steele made that pick. That was really a key moment in that game as they were taking momentum back. And I remember the frustration of the Ohio State offensive line that they just couldn't run the ball at will like they had against everybody else. So that was palpable, their frustration, and the frustration from their side when they couldn't get off the field with that 8-minute and 30-second drive. So that's some inside stuff where you maybe not get from other people.
Well, and then the iconic picture, Jay, you on the shoulders.
Oh yeah. So that picture, that's actually my roommate, Mike Ware. Mike actually played his first 2 years at Wheaton College, decided he wanted to play at a bigger school, walked on. And the story was I was living with 7 guys. I was living with Chris Norwell, Juice, Kevin Mitchell, and some other guys on the team. And we had a dog called Oski Bow Wow. And Oski Bow Wow was not really taken care of much by 7 guys. I do feel bad for all you animal lovers. I do have a dog now. I've learned a lot better. But I think we had one of my teammates' girlfriends took care of him and fed him. But we didn't pay much attention other than that we showed off that we had this dog called Oski Bow Wow. And so Oski Bow Wow basically was our house mascot. We lived in a house called Fort Monk. And and what ended up happening was my roommate, Mike Ware transfers, doesn't have anywhere to live. We're like, well, you can live with us, but you got to live in Oski's room, and he just poops in the room all the time. And so I said, if you clean it, you can stay there. He cleaned probably 200 pieces of poop out. My wife hates that story because it's just disgusting, right? So I still drive by the house on First Street sometimes. I think about that, but he moves in. He actually earns a scholarship his senior year. We win that game. He taps me and shows like, get on my shoulders. I'm like, no, there's probably like 75 Illinois fans in this little nook of like, I don't know if it's the south end zone of one of the end zones. Anyway, he's like, get on my shoulders. So finally I let him get on my shoulders. He picks me up and just starts screaming. And then, somebody takes a picture of that and was actually voted one of the more iconic photos of Illinois football. So that's how that happened. Here's an inside scoop on that is that before that happened, I ran down to the other side of the field, which is where the players' family tickets were given. And I went to my wife, who was playing volleyball in Illinois, Katie. And that was the first time I told her I was euphoric, that I loved her. And so I told her after the Ohio State game that I loved her. And that was the first time. So I give you some sappy stuff. I give you all of it. There's a lot of stuff going on in that moment that just, when you don't play, when you don't have to play for the last 8 minutes of the game, you got a lot to think about. What am I going to do? I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that.
Right. Thanks, Juice. Appreciate it. 2 more, Jay. Why is his name a single letter, not a full name?
Well, let me wipe up my camera. I feel like I'm a little foggy there. Oh, there we go. I think that's better. Why is my name a single letter? So a good question. So first off, my name is Jeremy. For those that don't know, okay. Jeremy Werner will tell you this, that his mom thought that name was probably unique. And then my mom thought it was unique. And then my graduating class at Champaign Central High had 4 Jeremys. Wow. So it became a sexy name in the 80s. It's now on the banned list, been replaced by Owen, Carson, and Aiden, and all these cool ones, right, for guys. So if you're naming your kid Jeremy today, you're probably not in the popular name list. Okay. That being said, I had an older brother named Jonathan. He went by JD, Jonathan David. And then my other brother went by AJ. And he was Andrew James. So they wanted to go by initials. I was Jeremy Jacob, and I went by JJ. But my dad would get so confused. He'd be like, JD, AJ, JJ, AJ, JJ, AJ. And he got so confused. He got mad one day. He's like, that's it. You're just going to be Jay. So I go to school. I write my name, J-A-Y, and the parents come to class and whatnot. And this is probably 4th or 5th grade. My dad comes in and I was like, why do you write your name J-A-Y? I was like, I just, that's what I thought people like do. He's like, no, we just go by initials. Just put the letter J. And so then I just started putting J without a period, without anything, really threw people off. Still throws people off to this day that don't know me. And I've had teammates that I played with for 5 years, but wait a second, your name's Jeremy, because everything is documented that I'm Jay and on cards, on everything, and you can find official documents, and obviously my license would say Jeremy, but most people just know me as Jay. So that's the backstory. There's a lot of good backstories on this, man.
All right, last one. Is Jay still a hyena?
Are we actually going to listen to this, or are you just watching it?
Yes. Oh, love it.
Okay, so I don't know where the accent comes from. I don't know if I was just trying to be funny or the nasty kind of
nasty.
I kind of had that. I kind of really wanted to be a hick a little bit more so. Maybe I've just been civilized a little bit, but yes, So I want to give full credit for the first time ever on a live thing on where the hyenas thing came from. And really, I've gotten a lot of credit for it. It was really Tom Sims, the defensive line coach. He would say, so IFF, yes, I am still a hyena. Ooh, I don't know what hyenas do, but I just think of the hyenas.
Cackle, don't they?
Right? So Tom Sims, a great D-line coach, he would say, listen, like, hyenas are ruthless. Nobody wants to mess with hyenas. Like, they can attack the king of the jungle and, kill them. And if they all game together, so like, this is a perfect analogy. And now that I'm in media stuff, you just live for stuff that gives you something other than a milk toast answer, like other than the coach speaks. So I was like, yeah, we're like a pack of hyenas. We might not be the best. We might be the king of the jungle, but if we all get together, and act like hyenas, we can take down the king of the jungle. And these producers, they loved it. They just loved it. Before I got on there, Tassioner's like, I'm combing your hair. Because I came in, it was just like, I'm combing your hair. You're doing this. And then I said that, and they were like, that's incredible. We got it. So that's the hyena story.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Jay, this was a lot of fun. Appreciate everybody sending these questions. They did a better job than I ever would. So appreciate them sending it in. And thanks for playing a part in this, man. We'll talk about an actual football game next week. But this was fun.
Lots of fun. ILL.
This episode of the Illini Inquirer podcast is presented by Underdog Sports. We see a lot of you are downloading Underdog Sports, using the promo code, and having fun, which we love to see. If you haven't already checked out Underdog Sports, be sure to do so. It's super easy to use. You go on the app, go pick whether favorite players will have a higher or lower stat total than what is listed. For example, Travis Kelce, He's very popular these days. If his number is set at 50 receiving yards and you know Taylor Swift is in the house, you may feel confident he's going to go way higher than the number. Do that with 2 to 5 different players and you're in business. If you go 5 for 5, you can 20x your money. So sign up today with promo code Illini and get your first deposit doubled up to $100. Visit UnderdogFantasy.com or find them in the App Store. And don't forget to register with promo code Illini to get your first deposit doubled up to $100. There are a lot of fantasy companies out there, but we decided to partner with Underdog because it's the easiest place to play fantasy sports. It's also the fastest growing fantasy app in the industry. You must be 18 or older and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-522-4700 or visit www.ncpgambling.org.